Hello everybody, welcome back to High Ground. My name is Tanner, and today we're going to be talking about some of the events that took place for North America in Rainbow Six Siege's off-season during 2023, and what an off-season it has been. We're almost back to the league 2 weeks from today. From the time I'm recording this, NAL will come back and then give or take a few days for all of the other leagues, but yes, it is almost time to return. We also have some team changes, some roster changes, things like that to talk about, but I'm going to save that for a future video, hopefully coming out, before the stage actually starts. So 5 events to talk about today. One of them is international, one of them is the qualifier for that event, and then 3 took place in North America. So specifically, we're going to talk about in chronological order: Gamers Without Borders, Gamers 8, Element 1, Game Rogue, Summer Series, and Breaking Point. So starting with Gamers Without Borders, M80 and Dark Zero were the invited teams. West Garfield Park and Beast Coast each qualified through the open qualifiers, and the invited teams sort of stomped the qualifying teams 2-0 in both cases. M80 taking down West Garfield Park 7-4, 7-3 on Chalet and Bank, and Dark Zero taking down Beast Coast 7-3, 7-5 on Bank in Oregon. They take each other on in the grand final, and it's a pretty close match, all things considered. It does go all 5 maps. All 5 maps, in fact, do not go overtime though, so no overtime for this whole event. 9 maps played, no overtime. 7-5s and 7-2s make up all 5 of these maps. Both of the 7-2s actually done by M80 though, so a 7-2 for them on map 1, and then a couple of 7-5s for Dark Zero on maps 2 and 3, a 7-2 map 4 for M80, and then 7-5 to close it out for M80 on map number 5. So they were certainly the better team. Not only did they take 3 of the 5 maps, but they also dominantly won 2 of the maps that they won, whereas Dark Zero only won 7-5 maps on 2 and 3. And Dark Zero, they were close. Of course, they were up 2-1. They just had to win Clubhouse or Theme Park, but they couldn't quite do it, and that sends M80 to Gamers 8, which is what we're going to talk about next. Gamers 8 consisted of 8 teams, 4 of them being directly invited, 4 of them qualifying. The qualifying North American team, of course, being M80 like we just talked about. From Europe, we had BDS. From South America, we had Ninjas in Pajamas. And from Korea and Japan, we had Cyclops. 3 of the 4 invited teams were just the top 3 teams from SI, which were G2, W7M, and Oxygen. And the final invited team was Falcon, sort of the hometown team representing the Middle East, North Africa region, just like they did last year at Gamers 8, where they actually had a bit of a surprising performance. I think a lot of people counted them out, but they did fairly well, just like they do here. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. In Group A, we have Ninjas taking down Falcons 2-0 and M80 taking down G2 2-1. Keep in mind, G2, they just made a roster change. They brought in Gemini, replacing Blur. M80 still fairly recent with their changes, but I guess not absolutely brand new, bringing in Iconic and Spoit. And then M80 takes down Ninjas in Pajamas 2-1, so a couple of 3-map affairs, and M80 makes it to the playoffs. In the lower bracket, G2 falls to Falcons 2-0, so I guess they got 1 map win, but still they get double eliminated quite hastily. Ninjas in Pajamas lose the rematch to Falcons, sending Falcons to the playoff bracket along with M80. In Group B, Oxygen loses 0-2 to BDS, Cyclops loses 0-2 to W7M. I think pretty expected results. Do keep in mind Oxygen did make a roster change coming into this. They debut Fish here. I think all things considered, most people expected these games to go the way that they did. BDS beating W7M, I think a little bit of a surprise, but not a massive shocker. I guess you could have seen it go either way there. It did go all 3 maps. Oxygen gets a series win in the lower bracket against Cyclops 2-0, but then they're sent home by W7M in a 2-0 fashion, just like they beat Cyclops previously. And yeah, W7M and BDS, the 2 teams making it out of that group. I don't think that was very surprising. In the playoffs, BDS 2-0s Falcons, and M80 actually 2-1s W7M, so once again they go map 3. And in the grand final, M80 does make it 3 maps, but unfortunately for them, this was a grand final and they didn't win a map. So BDS takes it down 3-0, very decisive. They won 7-2, 7-5, 7-4, so no overtime, and the only map BDS lost in this entire event, I guess, was 1 map to W7M. They 2-0'd Oxygen, they 2-0'd Falcons, and they 3-0'd M80, so good for them. Back-to-back Gamers 8 champions, making several players on BDS, I think the highest earning players in the game, passing several other players that had went far at majors and SIs and whatnot. So yeah, no super impressive performances at other events, but they've done very well at Gamers 8, making them quite a lot of money. Okay, let's move on to the next event. Element 1 is sort of the successor to Challenger League. It's the new Premier T2 thing. I guess it is just the T2 thing. And there's also some other events, but it basically replaced Challenger League. Not going to be talking about the Swiss stage here, just going to be talking about the 8-team playoffs. So 4 quarterfinals, a couple of semis, and then 1 grand final. The playoff, or the quarterfinals rather, pretty unexciting. All of them 2-0s except for a 2-1 victory for Space Station Gaming Academy over Wildcard Aces. So pretty tight match there, 7-3 win first map, but then a couple of 8-6s, and SSGA advances after the third map. But then Karn & Co, no overtime, they win 2-0. Aerial Rise 2-0 with no overtime. Gang Gang Gaming even more decisively 2-0 with no overtime. So yeah, just one close matchup in the quarterfinals, but no more. And I think going into this, most people expected it to be SSGA versus Aerial Rise in the grand final, but a bit of a twist of fate. Karn & Co and GGG eliminate both of them, and I think GGG people would have maybe expected over one of the other teams, but I do think Karn & Co was a surprise to a lot of people. And then Karn & Co versus GGG, this might be the best match of the year, one of the best matches, if not just the best match. All max regulation or overtime wins. It is a reverse 3-0, and it is the underdog team that pulls out the reverse 3-0, of course. Not just because they were down 0-2, but just going into the matchup, I think. GGG with a lot of big names that had played in Pro League before, and then Karn & Co, a lot of T2 vets, but still, up-and-comers in a sense. 7-5 win on Clubhouse and Chalet for GGG, but then 8-6, 8-6, 8-6, Theme Park, Oregon Bank, and they showed tremendous resolve. Really great win. Again, a big underdog story. This is a really fun one. Go back and watch it if you have, I guess, a tremendous amount of time to devote to watching it. I guess if you go back and rewatch it, you can skip through the downtime and whatever, so it'll be quicker. But still, a banger of a match. I guess you now know the result, but still, I think it's worth watching nonetheless. And then let's move on to the next event. Game Rogue Summer Series, so a Swiss stage here as well. Also not going to be talking about that, just going to be focusing on the playoffs. There are some pro teams present here, so we have Oxygen, we have Beast Coast, and we have Mirage all in the playoffs. So all 2-0s across the board in the quarterfinals. We see 1 overtime map, and I guess we see like 4 overtime maps over the course of the whole playoffs, but still only 1 in the quarterfinals. So all decisive stuff. SSG Academy over Beast Coast, Oxygen over Alpha Aetheris, Aerial Rise over Karn & Co, and Mirage over Cruelty. And then we see SSGA get kind of, not massively stomped. 7-3 win, 8-6 win by Oxygen, so at least they get 1 overtime map on them, but still, Oxygen does not drop a map, and, as you can see in the grand final, they still don't drop a map. 7-0 from them. Good stuff there. I think they were looking for a little bit of a bounce back after not an embarrassing performance, but not a great performance at Gamers 8. Mirage 2-1 over Aerial Rise. Yeah, they do lose in overtime on Oregon, but then on Cafe, it's a 7-2, and on Chalet, it's a 7-1. Good showing from them there. And then in the grand final, Oxygen versus Mirage, 7-2, 8-7, 7-2. So the 1 close overtime map like we saw in a couple of the other series, but decisive 7-2s on the other 2. It's Skyscraper into Border into Clubhouse there. Don't even get to see Oregon or Consulate. And that does it for this one. Let's go talk about the final event. Breaking Point sort of caps off the off-season for North America. Dark Zero over Karn & Co, Attack over Beast Coast, Space Station over Mirage, and GGG over Aerial Rise. All 2-0s, just like we saw in the quarterfinals of the previous event, and just like we saw there as well. Only 1 overtime map in all 8 of those. And actually, this whole event, we see pretty much the minimum number of maps played. There is a 3rd place match, but it was a forfeit. So I guess the only way we could have seen fewer maps is if there were other forfeits in the actual bracket, the quarters, the semis, or the grand. Very unlikely for that to happen, but yeah, we only see 14 maps over the course of what should have been 8 matches. Bare minimum stuff there. Dark Zero versus Attack, 10-8 on Border, and then a 7-4 on Bank. Space Station sort of humiliates GGG, 7-3, 7-0. This sort of harkens back to something that happened to Space Station a little while ago in the major qualifier. And then finally in the grand final, Dark Zero takes down Space Station. I think they were probably the most expected teams. I guess you could have maybe seen like GGG, Karn & Co, maybe Mirage sneak in there, especially GGG and Karn & Co, considering they were the grand finalists of Element 1. But no, it is the 2 better pro teams, I guess you'd say, in the grand final. And I guess I should also mention Beast Coast, but they've been struggling a little bit in the offseason. They made a couple of changes, got rid of Hyper and Vertical, brought in Reverse and Spiff, and we'll see. We'll see if they shape up for the season proper, but they haven't looked amazing thus far. Dark Zero's looked pretty good. Previously, they missed out on Gamers 8 very narrowly to M80. Oxygen had a good showing in the Game Rogue Summer Series, and then we've seen a little bit from Mirage and Beast Coast as well, but just like they were before, it looks like they might be more of low-tier NAL teams. We'll see what actually happens in the stage, though. I think that's all there is to talk about. Again, roster changes, team changes, all that stuff talked about, hopefully in a future video, and besides that, questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, corrections, all of that good stuff. Like, comment, subscribe. Appreciate all of that. And with all that being said, catch you guys next time.